afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm not sure. Wherever you are, my name is Jason Flame. It's Monday, and it's time for the Master Motivation Podcast coming at you from Moorpark, California. And today's guest is Mr. Jeff Harris. And Jeff Harris is the owner of JMJB Merchant Solutions, a credit card processing brokerage founded with the goal of helping businesses navigate the unnecessarily complex world of payments. More importantly, Jeff is a father of two amazing boys, has a passion for coaching youth sports, and has had quite the journey improving his mind and body through COVID. Jeff enjoys spending time with his family, his friends, exercising, and whenever possible, being by the water. He feels very appreciative to have been asked to be here on the show today, and I'm happy to have you. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing well, and thank you for reading that last line. It was important to me. So thank you very much for having me again, Jason. How you doing?
I am great, and I'm excited to have our chat today. People might not be able to see that shirt under that little banner there, but he's wearing the 75 hard. So we're going to definitely be talking about that. And if you've been following the post that as I was promoting the interview with Jeff, the picture that you see is a completely different person from who he is today. And that is the reason that I wanted to have him on the show. I wanted to talk about his transformation and his journey. But before we do that, Jeff, above and beyond the initial bio that I gave you, can you give us a little bit of your background? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. So I'll start with where you and I met initially. Right out of college, I started working for a billing company that serviced the martial arts space. It was APS, and then later became Member Solutions. And I did a variety of things for that company and spent time in sales and operations. And in 2015, we parted ways and ended up going into credit card processing for another company, just selling credit card processing door to door. And boy, that was very different than phone sales, but it really taught you how to relate to people and build rapport quickly. So it was super interesting and it was a lot of fun, truth be told. And I had serviced restaurants, primarily the hospitality space, as my go-to. That's where I spent most of my time. And then COVID hit, and I'm in Pennsylvania, so I live in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So I'm in Pennsylvania. COVID hits, and along with that, all the gyms and restaurants get shut down by the state. So there goes your business, and there goes your pipeline. So it was at that time where I decided to pivot and make a change, and decided to create my own brokerage of payments. So business owners could say, Jeff, here's what I'm doing, and here's what I'd like to do. And then it's up to me to go find the best and most cost-effective solution for them. So it's been an incredible ride. At each stage of my career, I've gotten to meet some incredible people. That first decade at Member Solutions, meeting you at a bunch of super shows and a variety of other people that still to this day either I'm in touch with or I follow on social media, it's been really fantastic. And it's exciting to be where I'm at now. And again, I feel I'm just very pleased to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you brought that up about social media because, in a lot of ways, in early years, and even now, social media can be somewhat of a burden, maybe, or sometimes a little bit negative, and you can get caught up in that. But on the flip side, how great is it that we get to utilize this service right here, right now, for us to connect, for us to have been able to keep in touch over all of these years and all of the different people that we've worked with in the industry and in our lives. So, social media plays a big part in everything that we do now. And as I was watching you and following you on your journey, again, we brought up the 75 hard. You had a huge physical transformation, but I think more importantly, it was a huge mental transformation for you as well. So let's get into that and talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know, and I'd be curious as I'm sharing part of my story for you to chime in with some of what you experienced along your journey as well, because I think there's a lot of different viewpoints and vantage points based on where people are in their lives and their career. And I think that would be really intriguing for people who may find themselves in that type of spot to listen to and hear. So just feel free to jump in too with your experiences. So it was the summer of 2020. Everything shut down. I am a person that loves and thrives being around other people, and being stuck in the house, for lack of a better term, for that period of time really got to me. And for the first time in my life, I started feeling depressed and anxious, to the point where a friend of mine said, hey, you probably should talk to a doctor about this, right? Because it was starting to impact my mental health. So see a doctor, end up going on like a antidepressant, a light dose of it to kind of bring myself back to where I was previously. And fast forward a couple months to early 2021, I joined a personal development community. It's called The Harvest, Personal and Professional Development. If you follow me on social, you likely see me tagging them and posting a lot about them because it's been really meaningful to me and to my personal, professional, and to my journey. So I'm in with a bunch of other entrepreneurs and business professionals, and I see these two guys like running in the snow because we get a lot of snow here. And
Right.
I'm thinking to myself, look at these two idiots outside exercising in the snow. No, that's ridiculous. And a month or two later, I realized that they're doing this program called 75 Hard. And I start looking into it, and I immediately go into I could never do that. I could never do
Mm.
that amount of exercise on a daily basis. I want to go have a drink once in a while. I could never do that, and I've never been a big drinker, but if I want to have a beer, I want to have a beer. And I kept telling myself I can't do that, I can't do that. And then I saw like 5 or 6 of the other people that I have a really tight relationship with in the group start talking about it, and I'm like, I'm depressed. I'm just not happy like I used to be.
Mhm.
Maybe this could be some like the impetus to changing all of that. So I texted my friend Justin, who I said I'm going to introduce you to. I think you guys will have some really cool conversation. And I said to him, "Hey man, are you doing the 75 hard thing?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm going on vacation. We're going to start in April." So we'll fast forward now to April of 2021, and on April 12th, actually of 2021, was day one of my new life, and I really look at it that way. I didn't quite get what I was I didn't really like grasp what I was getting myself into.
Mhm.
But any of the physical changes that you've seen between that headshot that I had sent you originally for the promo versus what I look like now is like peanuts compared to like what has changed in here.
Mhm.
And the mindset just that has been the absolute drastic change. So I'll tell you, I started 75 hard. You and I have met. I am not a tall human. I'm like 5'7". I tell people I'm 5'8" if I'm feeling crazy. And I was weighing in at about 279 at my heaviest during COVID. So I was very much out of shape and very overweight. Um, Fast forward to the end of the first 75 days of 75 hard, because I did do the entire live hard program that first year. At the end of those first 75 days, I was about 235. So in that short period of time, I lost about 45 pounds, just shy of it. And then I continued with it, and I continued with it, and I did phase one last summer, and then I did phase two last fall, and then I did phase three earlier this calendar year to complete the whole live heart cycle.
Mhm.
And right now I'm down right around 100 pounds, and exercising and working out is now part of my daily thing.
Yeah.
It's just, for those of you that aren't aware of 75 hard, there's 5 things that you need to complete on a daily basis, right? You need to take a progress picture of yourself. You don't have to post it anywhere. You just have to take a picture of yourself so you can see your transformation, ideally from the beginning throughout the program. You have to drink a gallon of water, right? One of these bad boys every day. You have to choose a diet, any diet, and stick to it. No cheat meals, no cheat snacks, nothing. And part of that is cutting out all alcohol. So there's no alcohol allowed in your diet. You have to read 10 pages of a book that is going to better you in some way, shape, or form, personally, professionally, spiritually, however you define that. And then there's the two 45-minute workouts. One of them has to be outdoors, and they can't be back to back. You have to space them out, meaning you really got to figure out how to manage your time.
Mhm.
And what I learned, Jason, in that first 75 days was exactly that: how to manage my time and make sure I still got all my stuff done that I needed to get done for work. I'm a dad with my boys. I coach them. I coach 2 soccer teams, and sometimes 2 soccer teams and 2 basketball teams, and sometimes 2 soccer teams and a baseball team. Making sure all that stuff still gets done, and I can still make sure that I completed my stuff for 75 hard and moved myself forward. What
Mhm.
was your experience going through that for the first time?
Yeah, so I mean, 75 hard. First of all, I was introduced. And I'm not sure who's watching right now. So if you're watching and you've done 75 hard, chime in so we can chat a little bit more. But 75 hard for me. I was introduced by Mr. Mark Cox. You may know him. He's got his podcast, Real Talk
Yeah.
with Mark Cox, and so he introduced me to listening to Andy Frisella, and started talking about 75 hard. And initially for me, workouts, no big deal. The water, no big deal. Um, the reading, I didn't love reading. I wasn't reading the right books, and I found myself forcing myself to read things I really didn't want to read. But then I started to find books that I did love to read, and now to this day, I was trying to think back as you were telling the story. I don't know when I did my first 75 hard, but I haven't stopped that. The 10 pages is one of the things that I've kept consistent and constant. And I actually really, really enjoy reading now a lot more. That was my hardest thing, but well, second hardest thing. The other hard thing for me was the diet because I overanalyzed it. I overanalyze it. Do I want to do keto? Do I want to do carnivore? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? And really, what I settled for was I cut out sugar. I just cut out, because I like candy, and I cut out. I told myself no bread, no white bread, no pasta, no white rice. All those real heavy starches because those are my go-to comfort foods. So it forced me to focus more on good high protein and good healthy fats, still allowing for carbs through vegetables and fruits and stuff like that.
Sure.
But that was the hardest because I over analyzed it, and I was literally what's the term? Um, I was paralyzed by analyzing. I was
Paralysis by analysis.
paralysis by
Yep.
analysis, absolutely, because I don't know what I want to do. I don't know, and then finally I just said, okay, I'm doing this, and I just went and did the 75 hard, did the phase one, did the phase two. I have yet to complete phase three. I've started it twice, but for whatever reason bailed out on it. Um, and the time management, you're 100% right. Because some people, just do the two workouts. They do one inside, do one outside, and do it back to back. The rule is, I think, 3 hours in between. And so I forced myself on my outdoor workout because I'm not an early riser to get up at before 6 o'clock. So I would get up at
Nice.
5:59, 5:59, and I went for a run. And it's funny because on my memories for the last week or so, I must have been doing a phase. So I see my early morning posts. I would post a story as I was out running in the dark. Um, but 75 hard has really changed a lot for me, like you said, mentally. And so for those of you watching, first of all, go listen to Andy Frisella, listen to a couple, and you'll be motivated as hell. And then I would recommend grabbing the book because as soon as I started reading the book, man, that was one of my really first good ones. That and Can't Hurt Me, or
Oh, I love that
yes,
one.
David Goggins.
Yeah.
Love it. So anyway, back to you. So you you completed 75 hard, and but mentally things changed. The depression, anxiety probably lessened, and your habits have now fully taken over. Talk about now as you go in, you're going to start 75 hard again coming up.
Yep. So I'll hit on a couple things because there's a few items you just touched on that I want to make sure I address. If you're going to read the David Goggins book, don't do what I did. Get the unedited version because I got the clean version and I read the clean version of the book. And then I saw him on social media and I didn't understand why he was so foul mouthed. And it made me realize that there's probably a lot in his book that I didn't necessarily get because I got the clean version. But he's fantastic. In one of the books that I read in 75 hard in that first 75 days was also James Clear Atomic Habits.
Mm,
And that was really helpful for me in figuring out how to overcome some of the habits and the bad habits that I've created and also how to create new habits. So whether you're going to do 75 hard or not, reading is a wonderful thing. And the most successful people that I've encountered and I interact with are avid readers. And to your point, they read what they enjoy. They don't read for the sake of reading. So if they pick
hmm
something up and it's not resonating with them, they'll put it down and they'll pick it back up at some point in the future when they
hmm
might be ready to hear and receive that message. So James Clear also puts out a newsletter, an e-newsletter once a week. I'd highly recommend getting on it. If you just Google Atomic Habits, or if you see this video and you're watching this, just post in the comments and tag me. I'll happily send it to you so you can get yourself subscribed. But it's really short, it's really sweet, and it's really some good content that he puts out on a weekly basis, some motivational quotes and positivity just to kind of get yourself thinking. So I got through that. So now we'll get on to the next one. So I had mentioned before that I had done 75 hard, and there were a group of us that had gone through it together. And I think two or three of us completed it through the end, phase one, phase two, phase three afterwards. And I think what 75 hard taught me and what I can draw from it, aside from the positive habits and having working out and drinking water, and eating a healthy diet consistently, like those are things that are now part of my life. And reading, one of the things that it taught me is that when shit gets really tough and you have a whole bunch of things happening and you're starting to feel out of control, how to quickly like get everything back in control, right? How to get your mind and your mindset there, so that you can get yourself back into control. Sarah, I got you. Good to see you. So that was one of the things that was so incredibly powerful to me, and I am just so fortunate that I went through it. Is that ability to, I don't want to say take a breath, collect, but like just to, when I need to, just turn it back on, and then it's on, and I'm ready to go. So I'm going to put this out there. I told Jason, and I've told some other friends as well. But I'm going to start another round of 75 hard with a couple friends of mine, starting September 1st. So I'm going to be away on vacation for the next couple days after this. And then once I'm back, let's get to business and knock it out again. The program is intended to be done once a year. And I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be doing that moving forward. It's just, I feel so many positive benefits from it. And just my mentality is just so different now than it once was. So
Now, let me ask you, how did your family respond to you doing 75 hard? Because, I learned a lot about myself as I went through 75 hard. And, I think maybe even my family and friends, learned a little bit about me, but there's also some people on the outside, and maybe you got this too, that are like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're super obsessed. Um, oh, don't worry, it's just one meal, or oh, come have a drink, it's just one drink. And you struggle to explain that to them, because if they don't get it, they don't get it. Because when you get in the zone on just saying you're going to do something, like, it's just like full steam ahead. There's no stopping. And that was one of the things that was hard for me starting 75 hard, or almost starting anything for me, because once I start something, I know how my mind reacts. I'm totally obsessive. I'm totally committed. I'm totally, everything else goes away, and I'm on that mission. So how did that affect you, and how did your family or friends respond and support or not support you?
yeah, great question. And to your point, you're still doing this on a weekly basis. For how long? And for how long further out are you booked? So you're right. When you put your mind to something, you do it. Do you remember? I want to say it was like sometime between week I'm sorry, like day 30 and 45, somewhere in that point, you get to what's called God mode.
Hmm.
And that's what Andy calls it in his book, Andy Frisella. And God mode essentially is like, oh my God, I'm actually doing this and you can't touch me. Like you're just in
Hmm.
that mentality, and it's not cocky, it's confidence that
Hmm.
you're of where you are and how your world around you is changing. So when I got to that point in time, if you weren't with me, that simple. And it was hard because there were some relationships in my life that were removed. But to be honest, it was something that I needed to do for my mental health and for my health. I should also add, because I left this out earlier, because this is a really important thing. I, for about 15 years, smoked cigarettes. And on April 12th was the first day I didn't have a cigarette of 2021. Haven't had one since, haven't had a desire to have one since. But that was part of 75 Hard, was cutting that out. And that had been
Hmm.
something that I had tried off and on to stop smoking, and had always failed. So this was the time where that was happening. And it was getting my health, my entire health in order, because I want to be around for my kids and ideally for grandchildren. And the way that I was going, it was less likely to happen. So there were some friends who were like, "What's this crazy stuff you're doing? You're crazy. I could never do that." And my response is, "You're right. If you think that you couldn't do it, then there's no way you're going to be able to." Never nasty, never negative, but I would think you're exactly right. But people started getting it, and they started realizing that I was going to continue doing this program, and then they started seeing the physical results they're never going to see the mental results, right? That's for me and for myself. But they started seeing the physical results, and they're like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to bug him and see if he wants a beer, or we're not going to question this, or for my diet, I went plant based, and I still am plant based to this day. I'll have fish once in a while, but I have a plant based diet, and people will be like, oh, don't you miss like burgers and this and that, and I don't. And if you want them, God bless, like do your thing. But for me, I don't. And if you're going to pressure me to eat a burger, I'm going to ask you why you're pressuring me to eat something. Like, stay in your
Right.
lane, mind your business. So it was simple in terms of the home stuff. Because I have two young kids. I would wake up every day like 5:15, 5:30, and like immediately do like an outdoor. It was a walk at first. Then like as I started losing weight and was able to, it became more of like a jog or a run. So I would always knock that first one out first thing in the morning, rain or shine, didn't matter. I know that if I didn't get that one done, the rest of the day was going to be challenging. So always
Hmm.
knock that first workout in, and then on the phases where it was required, as soon as that workout was over, cold shower, and knock that part out too. And that was kind of the way that I went about doing things.
Yeah, it's interesting because that was exactly my mindset. I knew if I didn't get my outdoor workout in very first thing, and yeah, the cold shower would have to, my reading would happen in the morning when we had to do the uh, visualization.
Yep.
I would try to do all of that, basically pregame for the day, and then I knew that I would be successful that day. That's interesting that we both think that same way. I'm thinking now, because I know that that's how my brain thinks, is to challenge myself to do something different. I was telling myself my next when I attempt the phase three again, that I'm going to do my second workout right before I go to bed, very last, and force myself, because I know I'm going to be like, I just want to go to bed, but it's pushing myself to do what I don't want to do that would be the challenge. So I'm going to try that one out this time to give it a different feel.
Isn't it crazy how like your mind starts working that way? It's like, how can I make this more difficult for myself? Right.
It's crazy. Why do we
So
do these things?
I don't know. Maybe it's a sense of accomplishment because you're going to do it. You're going to
Right.
knock it out, and you're going to have that better feeling and that better sense of accomplishment because you did it in a more challenging way than you had done it previously.
Hmm.
Perhaps that's why.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: because you're kind of more of a fitness enthusiast now, and you love the challenges. Have you ever done a Spartan race?
Not yet.
Not
So
yet.
I will. So when I head into 2022, I said to my doctor, um, I am thinking about doing a half marathon this year to check off my bucket list, and ultimately with the goal of doing a marathon. But I've been
Hmm.
having this hip pain only when I run.
Hmm.
I spend a lot of time with my Peloton. I love the Peloton. That's where I do a lot of my cardio.
Hmm.
And I want to start doing some more running. So I was doing some running, but like I would have this hip pain just in my right hip. So the doctor looks at me and he's like, "Listen, pal, I don't want to tell you this the wrong way, but I'm gonna be honest with you. You were behind the curve for such a long time that like maybe you should do your body a favor and just walk or do like light jogs." So that kind of went out the window for a brief period of time. Then I realized that if I run on grass or not on concrete, like I started running on like this path near where I live, that's it's like a dirt path. It's like paved, but it's dirt. It's not like concrete. And I
Right.
got like a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, and it doesn't hurt. My hip doesn't hurt. So I realized it was probably just the
Perfect.
impact of the concrete. So now we're back on track to I want to knock out a half marathon. I want to knock out a marathon. Both will likely be in 2023. And with that, a friend of mine does Spartan races. I'd love to do a Spartan race. I'd love to travel and go somewhere cool and do one
Yep.
not like in Philadelphia or New Jersey. How
Yeah.
about you?
Well,
Have you ever done one?
I have. It's one of my favorite. Once again, things popping up in my memories here and there. I've probably done a couple dozen Spartan races, all the way from the sprint to the super to the not the ultra. The ultra is a half marathon, but the beast is the half. No, I'm sorry. The ultra is a full marathon. The beast is a half marathon,
I
and
didn't realize they had one with a full marathon.
oh yeah, and they've got some big ones. I mean, they've got some really cool stuff. I'll tell you one of my highlights doing a Spartan race was I was out on the trails, and I got into it because my brother did it, and so I'm like, this is super cool. And interestingly enough, when I did my first Spartan, it was a super, so it was an 8 plus. I think it ended up being about 10 miles. And that was when I was at my heaviest. I was about 245, 248. And I remember looking at pictures going, this is bullshit. I can't do this anymore. And so I signed up for another race. I'm like, and I felt like he was dragging me the whole time. I'm like, next time I do one of these, I'm gonna kill it. And we went back and we did another one. But one of my best memories out on the Spartan course was I'm running up this trail, and then we have to grab this bag and lift it up over our head and then put it down and then do a burpee and then do it again. And I looked next to me, and this guy is killing it, just like absolutely killing it. And I realized to myself, it's Joe DeSena, who is the creator of the Spartan race. And I'm like, how freaking cool is this? And I didn't have my phone or anything to get like a picture or anything, but just that moment was super, super cool. That would be like being able to have Andy Frisella on my podcast. That would be like just such an, I'm
You
throwing
just
it
put
out
it.
there,
You just put
just
it out there. You just
throwing
put
it
it out
out there.
there. That's how the world works. You just put
get
it
me,
out there.
get me Andy Frisella. But yeah, no, I love the Spartan races, and you'll love it, because it isn't a hard run. I don't, running as a martial artist, my knees and my hips can only take so much of the pavement. But
Yeah.
out on the trails, it feels so good, and it's not a hard run. It's more of a fast paced hike, and just the camaraderie. That talk about the 75 hard community, kind
Yep.
of backing each other up, and that accountability, and just that whole team aspect. When you get out on the course with on the OCRs. I mean, man, they are so super supportive, and everybody's helping each other. It's a lot of fun. So you'll have fun with that. So
You
you got
got
to
me
tell
so
me what
you got me pumped for it. Now I want to
you got
go.
to go
Now I
do
want
one.
to do one.
You got to do one. I have one. There's one coming up in September. California's got some cool. We got some cool hills. So yeah, I think I'm gonna. Every time I've tried to sign up in the last like year, something at the studio pops up. Something, family, something, and I'm like, ugh, got to get back to it. I've been dying to do one. So anyway, Spartan race, got to do one. Let's talk a little bit more about. Let's talk about what are you reading right now? What are you reading as part of your 75 hard journey, or just part of your growth?
Yeah. So the most recent book that I picked up, the name of it is eluding me right now, but I'll share with you in a moment. Have you are you familiar with David Meltzer? He's pretty large in the personal development space. He used to run a really large sports like talent agency. What's what I'm looking for? Where you represent athletes like Jerry
Mm,
Maguire, like that
yeah,
type of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. Hmm.
So he did that and then started his own program. And I actually got to have lunch with him with a couple of the folks from that Harvest community that I had mentioned. And he gave us a copy of his book. And his book is a lot about, um, it's just a lot about how how we all are really energy and how what we put out comes back to us. And
Hmm.
a lot of it is a lot of what Nick Doherty, who you had on a couple months ago, a lot about
Hmm.
what he talked about. Oddly enough, like I watched that episode. So it's been really intriguing because I'm starting to spend more time in that space, in like that metaphysical space. I
Hmm.
don't feel confident enough in it, just truth be told, to speak in detail about it. But I'm finding and recognizing more coincidences that are happening in my life with when I put things and thoughts out there. Like you had said about putting Andy Frisell on your podcast, saying things like that and then having them come to fruition in one way, shape, or form has been really, really freaking cool.
Hmm.
So I'm spending more time reading in that, and that's likely what my lineup is going to be for the next round of 75 hard. Um, so I have that one that I'm reading now, and I have another one that I just picked up, and I started reading the first chapter but put a pause on it. It's called The Fourth Turning, I believe, and it's
Okay.
just about how we we as people typically don't learn from the history, right? And how things are cyclical within America. From the 1700s is one of the turnings, and the 1800s starting another one, and now we're entering or exiting the fourth turning within America's cycle, like culture. It's a really intriguing read. That one's not a 75 hard book. That's more of like a really cool, like I like this history type of
Hmm.
stuff and learn from the past book. So those are some of the things that I'm reading. I'll likely read Think and Grow Rich again and How to Win Friends and Influence People because I haven't read those in quite some time, and those are like ones that you don't just read one time.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's what's on the what I'm reading right now is the David Meltzer book, and that's what's on the docket next.
So you said Dave Meltzer, and the first name that came to my mind when
Mike Metzger.
well, no, I think Mike
That
Metzger.
was that was the first one.
I think about Mike Metzger all the time. Um, he's thinking why. Um, no, Dave Meltzer was a pro wrestling writer, if I'm not mistaken. That's the name, but that's what came up because I'm a huge pro
Really
wrestling fan. Huge pro wrestling fan.
interesting. I had no
But
idea.
Had no idea that Dave Meltzer wrote wrestling or that I was a wrestling fan.
I had no idea that he wrote wrestling. Maybe it's his
Oh,
doppelganger just by name. I don't
maybe,
know.
yeah, maybe exactly. It may be someone totally separate, but that's what popped into my head. But
Nice.
I'm reading something. I'm reading two things. One is I love John Maxwell, so I'm reading the Maxwell Daily Reader, which is just taken excerpts from all of his books, which is just amazing. That's my first read of the day. That's literally pop out of bed. After the shower, ready to go before I leave, I'm reading that. But my daughter bought me a book, and I've just been reading a lot of different things, and she bought me a book entitled "The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck."
You're the
So
second person in like the last week that has mentioned that book. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it.
I'm 20 pages in, so I'm
Okay.
only on day two. And by the way, I only read 10 pages a day of any given book because that's what 75 Hard taught me to do. And I know that if I start reading more than that 10 pages, I'm like, nah, don't want to really read. I actually look forward to it more by only reading the 10. And it's just funny, before you were talking about sometimes people pick up a book and put it down. I'm very careful about the book I pick up because in the rule of 75 Hard, if you start a book, you got to finish the book. So I'm
Yep.
very, very particular with that. 20 pages in so far. I can't even really give a synopsis on what I've read so far, other than the title and just how simple that is. And really, it's not about not giving about anything and not caring, but it's focusing your energy a little bit differently. Um, I guess the best way I could explain it is that when I'm so over hyper focused, like I know I am, sometimes, things start going amiss, or I start putting that extra pressure on myself. But if I say, I've got this, and this to do today, and if I don't get that last thing done, like let it go and move on and get it done tomorrow. So it's really more about that. Again, I'm only 20 pages in, so I know there's a lot more to read on it. I'm excited to read it. I'm pretty excited to read it because my daughter bought me this book,
It's
and
incredible.
my kids don't love to read, but they know that I do. So now that's become a thing. So I think eventually that might start having an effect down the line.
How
But
how
anyway,
how old are your kids?
my daughter is 20. Just
Okay.
started literally her first day today, junior in college. So,
Amazing. I hope she has a great year.
well, here's the thing: she spent 69 units in a community college online, and so she goes to take her very first day at Cal State Channel Islands, and her teacher has COVID, so she has to take her first day at home. And I'm like, she can't win. She had an online, or not online, um, a drive-through graduation for high school. I'm like, can my
Oh,
daughter catch a break on school? But anyway, she's a great kid. She's in good spirits. My son's 17, and he's a senior in high school. So my kids are a little bit older now.
amazing.
I'm missing those early days a little bit, but loving the new lessons that come along with it, because having kids at this age, it's not like it gets really any easier. It's just totally different. And I
Yeah.
mean, really different. How old are your kids?
So my oldest is 10 and my little one is 7. So
Okay.
a couple years behind. But if you recall, and I don't know if you were this way, I knew everything until I was in my early 20s, at which time I realized that I knew nothing and my parents knew a lot of things. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like that's when it started. So I'm curious if over the next couple of years, because your kids are watching you read and watching you practice these habits, if that's when they start recognizing how wonderful of habits those are for them to perhaps adopt.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
I hope so.
Wouldn't
I
rule it
hope
out.
so. Yeah. Well, so you talked about coaching. So
Yeah.
you love coaching youth sports. You and I have that in common. My son played baseball for 10 years. He
Nice.
played youth football. He's a high school wrestler now, MMA fighter. Loved coaching him all the way up. Tell me about your experience as a coach, and not only as a coach, but spending that time on the field with your kids.
Yeah, so the spending the time on the field with your kids means that your kids are going to be treated much more harshly than all the other kids on the team.
That's
That's
right.
just when your dad's the coach, you're going to be the one that's going to be running extra sprints because he doesn't see you hustling the way that he knows you can hustle. It's
That's
just
right.
kind of how it works. So I got thrown into coaching when so I grew up playing sports. I grew up playing, soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring, and a little bit of hockey over the summer. So I said to we decided for the kids that they were going to participate in team sports until they were 10. And then if they no
Hmm.
longer wanted to participate in team sports, totally fine. But I think there's something really important about winning and losing together, to build camaraderie, to lift each other up, that I wanted my children to experience. So it
Hmm.
started with soccer because, like every community, most parents don't want to volunteer. So it was the
Hmm.
ones that could volunteer. So I raised my hand and I coached soccer. And then my oldest son is a talented athlete. He's naturally gifted, which I like, but I also wish he wasn't as naturally gifted, because when they're not as naturally gifted, they will tend to work harder to achieve something because it's not easy. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Thank you, Jackie. Good to see you. So, secondly, when I started coaching his soccer team, you start building camaraderie with the other coaches because you realize you're in a small group of parents that are going to volunteer. So we
Hmm.
started volunteering and we start coaching soccer, and then Josh, my oldest, starts trying out and makes the travel soccer team. So we start coaching travel soccer. So my little guy at the time would come to his practice and would play on the fields, and he'd be a goalie or an extra defender if we were short a man when we were scrimmaging. So he got to
Hmm.
play with the older kids, which was great. So now it's his turn. So this is his first year in travel soccer. I coached his other teams beforehand, but it's his first year. And they both absolutely love it. They're both talented, but they both understand that they get some of their teammates might get a little bit of leeway. They get no leeway with
None.
coach.
None.
And that's how it works. So my oldest, I'm at a point now with soccer that I'm no there are other parents who are more effective at teaching skill. So for
Hmm.
Josh, for my oldest one, I've stepped to the side and I'm now like, I'll help out in practice if they need extra bodies. But there's coaches who know soccer much better that
Hmm.
are instructing them. I probably have another 2 or 3 years with coaching basketball until I get to that stage where like there's probably someone else that's going to be more effective.
Hmm.
Um, but my goal with coaching has been twofold, right? And as long as this achieved, I know it was successful. One, teach the kids more skills than they had coming into the season,
Hmm.
and teach them how to love the game, whatever
Oh,
game it
love that.
is.
It's
That's what it
awesome.
is. I could care. I'm competitive, but I could care less if they win. Right? It's really not important to me. I want them to love the sport. When they get older, it's going to be all competition. That's the world that we live in. So
Hmm.
now, as a kid, go have fun, get better at whatever sport you're playing now than when you were when you started, and learn to love the sport, to love the camaraderie, to love those soft things in the game, so that
Yep.
they want to keep coming back. And that's kind of how I've always coached with that mentality in mind. So
That is it's so amazing to hear because those are exactly, it's funny because soccer was the first sport. I mean, martial arts, of course, right? Both
yeah,
my kids did martial arts, and I've been teaching martial arts for a long time. But when my kids were little, when my daughter jumped in, soccer was one of the first things. And I don't know diddly about soccer. I don't know anything about soccer, but I knew that I could coach. I knew that I could motivate them and teach them basic skills. But that was always my goal, whether it was soccer or baseball or anything else. If I could teach you to be better than you were when you started, and I could help you love it enough so that you wanted to play the next year, I knew that you had a future, and I knew that that would be, the best thing for the kids. And it's just, it would be so amazing if we had more coaches that thought exactly that way, because then there's a love for the sport instead of playing because they have to, or playing because they think they have to, or any listen, I'm all about when it comes to martial arts or swimming or certain things like that, where like you just have to do it. You just have to do it because those are skills that you need. I mean, let's face it, you don't need the skills that you learn in soccer, so you
yep.
should have fun. You need to learn self-defense, and you need to learn how to swim. Those are definitely two for me that are non-negotiables. But Daniel Groff is watching. What's up, Daniel? He says, hello, Jason and Jeff. Youth sports volunteers, such a rewarding experience. You have the correct outlook to teaching them to love a sport and understand the team aspect. And Daniel's a
Thank
great
you.
friend of mine here in Moore Park, and one of our city councilmen, a student here at Moore Park Karate and Krav Maga, and just an overall great guy. He coached his kids when he was little, and his daughter is a heck of a soccer player too.
It's amazing. Well, I wish them continued happiness and excitement as they're playing sports, and thank you for what you do for Jason's Town.
Yeah, man. Yeah, he does a lot. Trust me.
I'm
We,
sure.
we could have a whole conversation about that. But let's get back on track. Let's talk about
Yeah,
some sports. So since you coached your kids' sports, soccer and basketball, I believe you said, did you play sports growing up and coming up through high school? Talk about it.
yeah, yeah. So I played soccer. I played soccer competitively up until the high school level. So I played on a local travel team. So we traveled against other towns in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and that was amazing. I built some wonderful friendships with some kids that I played with in my community at the time. I played basketball and I absolutely loved basketball, but I'm 5'7" and I really can't jump very high. So I was more of like a distributor. I would run the point, and I knew my role. But I played basketball up until the beginning of high school, like with a bunch of different rec leagues in the area. Baseball, I stopped playing in like seventh or eighth grade. I remember I made like the I think it was the JV team, and for some reason I couldn't track fly balls off of the bat. So you said you played baseball; that was your sport, right? Or at least a sport that you
My,
coached.
my son played baseball. I actually only played 1 year of baseball ever in my life, but I coached it way more than I played it.
Gotcha. So for some reason, and I don't know if it's my eyesight or what it was, I had a really hard time tracking the baseball off the bat into like the sky. I couldn't see the
Hmm.
white ball against the blue sky. So I there was really very few positions you can play where in baseball where it's okay not to be able to catch a baseball because you can't see it. So at that point, I actually transitioned. I played tennis. I played tennis through all of high school. I was the captain of my high school varsity tennis team, and absolutely loved playing. And that's when I learned that soccer and tennis were the two sports where you ran the most, which I never really thought about. So part of what I do with my kids is when they're not listening, they run. It's just simple. They do laps, and there are some practices where there's a lot of running. But they also understand that they may not be they may be outplayed, but they'll never be out hustled, right? And
Right.
that was a really important thing that I wanted them to understand, and that translates to what we do professionally, and translates to the working world too, right? You can if you have that ethic, that work ethic, you can never be
Hmm.
outworked. You might be outskilled, but you can never be outworked, and that's something that I hope they take with them as they get older. Not just my kids, all the kids that we coach. But tennis was my go-to, and I absolutely loved it. I taught it, I played it, I love tennis.
Well, I want to touch on something that you mentioned. You just kind of glossed over it when you were talking about basketball. That you were short, so you were a distributor, though, is what you said, and that stuck in my head because I think that that's a very unique skill and ability to know that you can contribute to the team without being the star or making the shot, right? I mean, Michael Jordan was great, but he played even better with Scottie Pippen, right? Talk
It's
about that in your career, how you've been someone that, I mean, I know that you've had success in your life, but that attitude of helping others to see success. I mean, obviously, being someone that volunteers and coaches, it's in your heart to help others succeed, right? So, talk about that point just real quick.
Yeah, and that's I feel like we could spend hours talking about that specifically because um that is something that's very, very important to me. Making sure that other people are good, are taken care of, and that are being helped, even though it might not always be in what's the best interest for me at the time. So, in sports, that's why I think team sports I mentioned earlier is so incredibly important because on team sports you're going to have kids that are incredible athletes that can dominate and do the scoring in whatever way, shape, or form that looks like. You're going to have other kids that are going to be able to stop the other team from scoring, playing defense, and there's going to be kids that are going to help the scorers or help the defenders, right? And that translates to what we do now, right? I'll give you an example. I do credit card processing professionally. At the beginning of COVID, I can count on this hand. Wait, we're going to move it over here. How many people wanted to talk about credit card processing when their businesses were closed? and they were being forced shut down, right? You know what they wanted to talk about? They wanted to talk about PPP loans. They wanted to talk about capital. They wanted to talk about the EIDL, like the other loan, the other programs that were out there to help infuse cash into their businesses so that they didn't have to close their business for good. So, guess what? That was what our conversations were about. They had nothing to do with what I was doing professionally. I wasn't
Mhm.
making a goddamn penny on any of those discussions. But it's not what it was about. It's about helping that business and potentially connecting that business with a banker, with a payroll company, with someone who could help them with what their need was at the time. And by having that service focused approach to helping other people, whether you like it or not, those things are going to come back to you. And 3, 6 months later, as things somewhat normalized, and it was still not really normal. I mean, they're much better, but as things started to normalize, that's when those conversations started turning into, oh, by the way, do you think you could help me with my credit card processing, or do you think you can help me with this? But that was never the intention. It was unconditionally looking to help other people get out of whatever scenario they were in, or help them keep their business open. And the world and the universe works in a really funny way. When you go help other people, it comes back to you. Um, so I think that's a nice little parallel that you get. Sometimes it's not all about you and getting what you want at the time. It's about helping other people achieve and keep their make sure they're good to go.
Well, earlier you mentioned how in your early 20s you learned how much you didn't know and how much your parents actually knew and how much smarter they were. And now you're talking about something that I think is very wise, that quite honestly took me some time to learn about that service, centered approach, whether it be in business or in your life. But you're 100% right. It does come back to you without even wanting it to come back to you. The more you serve, Daniel, who is watching, and Jackie, my wife, who is watching, we're all three of us are members of our Rotary Club. And the Rotary is all about service above self. And man, I've learned so much about that over these last few years, and it is just amazing, what comes out of that for everybody, because it becomes not just a win and not just a win-win, but it's a win-win-win, right? It's a win for me, it's a win for you, and it's a win right now for everybody watching, just learning about this. So I think that's just an amazing way to kind of close this chapter of this show. Now I can't believe that it's already been 50 minutes. That went way faster than I ever anticipated. Great conversation today. So, thank you to Sarah, and thank you to Jackie, and thank you to Daniel, all of you guys for watching and commenting. And for anybody else watching this now, or maybe you're watching this on the replay, drop a comment in there, hashtag replay if you're watching it later, or just share this and share this message, because Jeff has shared quite a few things with us from, the service centered focus, talking about coaching kids, uh, talking about the 75 hard program. We talked about a lot today. So, Jeff, I just want to thank you for your time, and thanks for the inspiration and motivation. You don't know that by me watching you on your journey, it's like, well, damn it, Jeff is doing 75 hard. I better jump on that shit again. And Jeff's out there running in the rain, and I'm complaining that it's too cold outside because we don't get a lot of rain in California. But but man, you're doing a great job out there. So thank you so much, and thanks again, Sarah, for watching. Any closing thoughts, Jeff, that you want to leave everybody with before we wrap up today?
Absolutely. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun, and I'm happy you and I had a chance to connect. And let's do this again. It doesn't have to be recorded, but let's make sure that you and I stay connected. For anyone that was watching that wants any information on what we had talked about, 75 Hard, how to get started, anything like that, the James Clear newsletter, I know Sarah had asked for that, but if there's anything that you had heard in this podcast, find me on social, Jeff Harris on Facebook, JMJB Payments on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. But let's connect, and if there's a way that I can help you, I can open up my network to you, I'm happy to do so. But Jason, thanks again. This was an absolute blast, and it was great catching up.
Absolutely. And just to remind everybody, I'm here every Monday, 12 p.m. Pacific, California time. And just to give you a heads up, coming up on the show, we got Mike Caro coming up, Mike Storms, TJ Williams, Chris Casamassa, Brett Wagner, Shane Tassel. We got a killer lineup, and I am booking 2023. I think, let's take a look here. I'm already booked through July 10th. I just booked Joey Perry. So if anybody would like to be on the show, or if you'd like to nominate someone to be on the show, I love having these chats. This is the best way for me to start my week, is talking to people like Jeff and just sharing their story and giving everybody a little extra motivation for the week. So thanks again, Jeff, and hang tight. I'm going to wrap it up with our closing video, but I'll come right back to you, okay?
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. We'll see you all next Monday. Take care.